After returning from a long overseas business trip, I was talking with my colleague, Emily, when I heard our boss, John, shouting from behind. "Stay away from her." I couldn't believe my ears. Emily was also bewildered. Then John dropped a bombshell. "Emily and I are going to start dating." He said this while putting his arm around Emily's shoulder. It was clear that Emily was uncomfortable. There's no way Emily would date John. That's simply impossible. Because my name is David Smith, I'm 32 years old. I currently work for a major construction company. My main tasks involve building construction and tunnel excavation. I've been interested in buildings since I was a child, influenced by my father. That's why I jumped into this industry. My father worked at a construction company and built many buildings. He proudly showed me the completed buildings, and he looked radiant. Wanting to start this job and become skilled as soon as possible, I began working right after graduating from high school. Against my parents' wishes. My father always said, "You'll struggle if you don't graduate from college," but I ignored him. I had an unfounded confidence that as long as I was motivated, I'd be fine without a degree. But later, I would come to realize that my father was not entirely wrong. After joining a well-known construction company in my hometown, I worked energetically as an apprentice. I did everything I could and actively studied. Though I never liked studying, I could do anything related to my beloved construction work. My bosses and colleagues were kind, and I quickly gained skills. Then, a turning point came. A few years after I started working, I received a transfer notice from the head office. In this company, there is a mandatory transfer every few years to better understand the company. Though I was prepared, I was stunned when I saw the paper from the head office. I was being transferred to the sales department at the head office. Could someone like me, who had always worked on site, handle sales? I was extremely anxious. And my fears would come true. On my first day in the sales department, I walked into the office with nervous steps. It had been a while since I wore a suit, so my movements were awkward. Then, a beautiful woman appeared in front of me. "You're David, right?" "I'm Emily, and I'll be your mentor from today." "Nice to meet you." Emily said this and guided me to my desk. Seeing how kind and approachable Emily seemed, I felt genuinely relieved. And looking at Emily's face reminded me of something. "Are you the Emily who started the same time as me?" Yes, Emily had sat next to me at the welcome party. I remembered how Emily had kindly talked to me since I was fresh out of high school and nervous. Emily seemed to remember the day too when her face brightened up. "Oh, you're that guy. I remember. It's been years since then. It's so nostalgic." We started reminiscing about our early days as new employees, completely sidetracking from work. But then, a loud voice interrupted us from behind. "Chatting right after a transfer? You've got some nerve. I heard you were a high school graduate from the field. But I didn't expect you to look so incompetent. Stop distracting Emily from her work." John was inexplicably furious with me. I couldn't understand why I was being scolded so harshly. What did he mean by saying I looked incompetent because I graduated high school? Emily immediately came to my defense. "David is my peer, and we were just catching up. I plan to have him shadow me on sales calls so he can gradually learn the job. With his field experience, he'll adapt quickly." Hearing this, John laughed. "Emily, you were peers with this high school graduate? Don't worry. I'll assign a different mentor to him." I was shocked. This was the first time I truly understood what my father meant about struggling without a college degree. Emily looked displeased and unsatisfied with John's decision. "But I already prepared training materials for him based on your request, so I'd like to continue as his mentor." But John was adamant. "Sorry for the trouble, but I'll assign him a more suitable mentor." "Jim. Come here." An employee named Jim, who looked a bit older than me, stepped forward. John appointed him as my mentor. "Jim, you'll be mentoring this guy from today. He's a high school graduate like you. It's best for a high school graduate to be trained by another high school graduate." Brilliant idea, if I say so myself. John walked away, patting himself on the back. It became clear that John was extremely concerned with academic qualifications and looked down on high school graduates. I felt only anxiety about the future. As I stood there bewildered, Emily sighed deeply and said to me, "I'm really sorry. John is such a moody person. It's so frustrating. But you'll get used to it soon." Then she returned to her desk. Jim quickly approached me, instructing me to join him for sales rounds. I followed Jim as told. Once we left the office for our sales calls, Jim said something surprising. "David, you're about my age, right? I've been wanting to transfer out of here, but I haven't gotten the orders yet. I don't want to work under someone like John." Jim sighed deeply. It's natural not to want to work under someone as arrogant as John. Trying to console Jim, I said, "I understand how you feel. I was called incompetent just for being a high school graduate right after my transfer. I'm worried about how things will go from here." But Jim's expression didn't brighten. Then he revealed something shocking. "The reason he switched your mentor from Emily to me is because Emily is his favorite. He probably didn't like seeing you talking to her." "What? He changed my mentor just because of that?" Jim continued. "Yeah. The sales department is John's domain. In the past, he transferred male employees rumored to be close to Emily. That's the kind of person he is." I was speechless. It's one thing for John to have feelings for Emily, who's much younger than him, but it's absurd for him to be jealous of other employees. I felt completely stunned. I had no confidence in my ability to work here without issues. For now, I followed Jim on his sales calls, taking notes on everything I needed to learn. I will learn my job quickly so that John won't say anything to me. I swore this in my heart. But when we returned to the office after the sales rounds, the atmosphere was unusually noisy. In the midst of my curiosity, I saw Emily approaching. I glanced over at John. Sure enough, John was watching Emily closely, just as Jim had said. It was evident that John had feelings for Emily. "John suddenly decided to wrap up work early today and have a welcome party for you. You're coming, right? Wrapping up work early for a welcome party." I appreciated the gesture, but I wondered if it was really okay to leave work early. I was sure John just wanted an excuse to go drinking with Emily. I was certain of that. Jim seemed to have the same thought and looked exasperated. "I'm glad they're having a party for me. I'll definitely join," I said, making Emily happy. Then, I returned to my desk to finish up some work before the party. Following Jim's instructions, I was working on preparing some materials. At 5 p.m., the office started heading to the designated pub. Emily got ready to leave and came over to my desk. "David, let's go." Though Emily invited me, I wanted to finish a bit more work first. "I'll be there soon. Please go ahead without me," I said, continuing my work. Emily, seeing my situation, said, "All right, I'll go ahead," and headed to the pub. Jim stayed with me, so I hurried to finish my work. Just as I was making progress, John came over to my desk. He dumped a pile of documents in front of me. Jim and I were both stunned. "These documents need to be sorted by tomorrow. You guys can come to the welcome party after finishing this." "Not that I expect you to finish." I was speechless. John left the office, laughing and in high spirits. Jim was shaking with anger. John planned this from the beginning. This is all John's work. It's infuriating. I upset Jim because of my actions. Missing the welcome party bothered me less than that. I apologized to Jim profusely. "I'm sorry for this. I'll handle it alone, so please go to the welcome party." But Jim picked up some of the documents and started working on his computer. "A party without you wouldn't be any fun. Besides, I don't want to drink with someone like John." He said that and smiled. I was deeply grateful to Jim. After several hours, we had finished about half of the work. I went to the vending machine to get Jim a cup of coffee. I decided that, since there wasn't much left, I would finish the rest alone and let Jim go home. Just as I was about to return to the office, I heard a voice behind me. "You're still here. Everyone's waiting for you at the party." It was Emily. Apparently, John hadn't told everyone that Jim and I were still working. "Is the welcome party already over?" I asked, puzzled. Emily looked visibly annoyed. I slipped out because I didn't want to deal with a drunk John. I could understand that. Hearing Emily's words, I couldn't help but grimace. Seeing my expression, Emily asked me with concern, "Do you have so much work on your first day that you need to stay late?" I couldn't lie to Emily, so I told her everything about John dumping his work on me. Emily's eyes widened in shock. "What?" I had no idea. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." Emily looked genuinely upset. "This isn't your fault, so don't feel bad." But Emily shook her head. "John ruined your welcome party." "I'll help you finish this quickly, and then we can have a proper welcome party together." Emily rushed back to the office. Inside, Jim was furiously working on the documents without a break. He was surprised but pleased to see Emily joining the effort. Together, we worked hard and managed to finish the work. We decided to have my welcome party at a different bar, far from where John and the others were. Jim, freed from the work, chugged his beer in one go. Even Emily joined him, drinking her beer down. "I really want to get back at John someday," Jim shouted. Emily also vented her frustrations. "Ever since John became our boss, I've been having nightmares every day. He keeps messaging me for no reason. It's unbearable." I was stunned. John was bothering Emily even outside of work. No wonder she was having nightmares. Jim, hearing Emily, gave her some advice. "Emily, you're beautiful and graceful, so you're very popular among the male employees. John especially likes you. He might be trying to make you his girlfriend. Be careful." Emily shuddered. "No way. That's insane." She downed another beer. Despite the short time, we had a fun welcome party. We promised to go out again and exchanged contact information before leaving the bar. As we stepped out, I felt a chill run down my spine. John was standing right in front of us. "What are you doing here?" And with Emily. We all turned pale. Emily quickly tried to defuse the situation. "We just ran into each other and decided to have a meal together." But John, already drunk, wasn't convinced and started shouting, "How dare you meet behind my back? And drinking with Emily without my permission? You'll pay for this." Jim and I were speechless. Why would we need John's permission to drink with Emily? It made no sense. "John, you're drunk. Let's just go home," Emily said, trying to calm him down. Despite her earlier dislike for John, Emily was willing to leave with him for our sake. John happily walked beside her, grinning like a fool. I was too stunned to speak, realizing just how foolish he was. The next day, I trudged to the office with a heavy heart. After yesterday's events, I had no idea what John might say. I braced myself for the worst. Sure enough, as soon as John arrived, he made a point of walking past me and loudly said, "Having a high school graduate here drags everyone's morale down. It's really awful." John constantly made snide remarks about Jim and me. Just because he graduated from an elite college didn't give him the right to look down on others. But I ignored John and kept working. If I quit now, I would be giving him exactly his wish. Despite enduring John's relentless belittling, I persevered. As the days went by and the toll on my mental and physical health grew, a rumor began circulating in the office. It was a rumor that Emily and I were dating. Since exchanging contact information, Emily and I had been frequently meeting up to vent about John, and some colleagues had seen us together. I knew this would cause trouble if it reached John's ears. But it was already too late. Just as I was about to head out for my usual sales rounds, John suddenly appeared before me and dropped a bombshell. "You don't need to go on sales calls anymore." "Ha!" Seeing my confusion, John looked smug. "The head office is looking for someone for a long-term overseas assignment, and I recommended you. With your field experience, they decided to send you. You'll be gone for 3 years, and you leave in 2 days. Start preparing quickly." I was dumbfounded. It was all so sudden and forceful. My colleagues looked incredulous. Jim was trembling with anger. "I'm being sent on a long-term overseas assignment?" I asked repeatedly. But John just laughed. "I'll be glad to see you gone. You're not even close to being good enough for Emily." He really wanted to separate me from Emily that badly. I was in shock. But John's orders were absolute. I had no choice but to comply. Back at my desk, I started packing my things. Seeing this, Emily rushed over to me. "This is too cruel. I'll talk to John for you." She tried to go to John, but I stopped her. I couldn't let Emily get dragged into this. And so, I departed for overseas. The overseas assignment allowed me to use my experience and improve my skills, making it a valuable opportunity. What was supposed to be a 3-year stint turned into 4 years before I knew it. As I was working on site as usual, I received a phone call. It was from the main office in the US. I was instructed to return to the head office next week. I was finally going back to the US. I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of returning home. The day arrived, and after a long journey, I landed in the US. I headed straight to the office to greet everyone. The main office hasn't changed at all since I last visited. The same scenery greeted me as when I left for my long overseas assignment, which somehow felt reassuring. As I walked down the familiar hallway, I heard a voice call out from behind. I turned around to see Emily standing there. "Welcome back, David." I felt a bit nervous seeing Emily again after so long. "Jim has been eagerly waiting for your return too." Knowing that everyone had been waiting for me made me happy. As I was having a pleasant conversation with Emily, a sudden shout came from behind me. "Don't you dare mess with my girl just after coming back." I couldn't believe my ears. What on earth was he talking about? Emily also looked confused, staring at John. "What are you saying? Emily isn't your girlfriend. You shouldn't talk like that in front of a female colleague." When I said that, John glared at me. Then he said something unbelievable. "Emily and I are going to start dating." "Who do you think you are to talk to a department head like that?" John put his arm around Emily's shoulder. Emily pushed him away, saying, "John, stop it. I don't like you at all." "What? Emily, you do like me, right?" Despite Emily's clear rejection, John wouldn't accept it. Just then, a loud laugh came from behind me. It was Jim. "John, you should stop harassing Emily." "Shut up. This has nothing to do with you. Why are you interfering?" John's loud voice attracted a crowd in the hallway. Everyone watched in shock as John made a scene. Then suddenly, the hallway fell silent. Someone pushed through the crowd and addressed John. "What's all this commotion, John?" The president, Mr. Johnson, looked at John curiously. Then, noticing me, he smiled. "David, you're back. Emily missed you so much. Finally, after 2 years of marriage, you can live together properly." "Dad, please stop saying that in front of everyone." Emily blushed, her face turning bright red. Sorry. I just got excited seeing how happy you are." "Well, see you later," Mr. Johnson said, heading into the conference room. John looked bewildered. "What? Married for 2 years? Emily is the president's daughter?" John was completely confused. I decided to tell him the truth. "I thought you knew, John. Emily is Mr. Johnson's daughter and my wife." "What?" John looked stunned. Jim laughed again. "That's why I told you to stop bothering Emily," Jim said. John stared at me in disbelief, so I showed him the matching wedding ring on my left hand. Finally understanding the situation, John left the scene, looking dejected. The gathered crowd started clapping, congratulating us. The truth was, Emily and I had gotten married 2 years ago during my time overseas. When the rumors about us dating started, we were already a couple. Emily always listened to me and supported me through tough times. I wouldn't have made it through without her. I proposed to Emily while I was still overseas because I wanted to be with her even more. I discovered Emily was the president's daughter when I came back to the US briefly and met her parents. I was shocked when Mr. Johnson came out of the house. He kindly welcomed me and quickly approved our marriage, believing I could make Emily happy. Emily didn't want people to know she was the president's daughter, so we only told our closest friend, Jim, about our marriage. That's why John didn't know. While I was on the overseas assignment, Emily and I kept in close contact, eagerly looking forward to the day we could live together. Finally, the day had come, and I was overjoyed at the thought. As I entered the sales department office, chatting with Emily and Jim to catch up on lost time, I saw John, who looked incredibly angry. He couldn't accept that Emily was now with me. His face was contorted with rage, red as a beet. Seeing me enter the office, he immediately shouted at me. "Someone like you, a mere high school graduate, doesn't belong in this sales department. Why did you come back? You should have stayed overseas forever." Here we go again. I had anticipated this reaction when I told him about marrying Emily. But hearing John's harsh words after so long was tough. If I argued back, it would only escalate things. I bit my lip and endured it. However, John, angered by my silence, hurled even more hurtful words at me. "Oh, there's another long-term overseas assignment opening up. David, why don't you take it?" "Yeah, let's do that." What was he saying? I had just returned. If he didn't want to work with me, he should take the overseas assignment himself. I could only sigh. Then, a loud voice came from behind me. "That won't be happening. Mr. Johnson. Why are you here?" The person who shouted behind me was Mr. Johnson. It seemed Mr. Johnson had been listening to John all the time. John starts to get upset. "This is my company. I can be wherever I want. Do you always belittle David like this?" Mr. Johnson was clearly angry. "No, it was just a joke. This is the first time I said something like that. Right, David?" John tried to get me to back him up. Did he really think I would support him? I would never do that. I told Mr. Johnson the truth. John always calls me and Jim useless high school graduates. I've gotten used to it by now. John's face fell, as if the world was ending. Jim nodded in agreement. Just earlier, Emily also told me about John's true nature. I couldn't believe it, so I decided to check on the sales department. And this is what I found. "John, you don't understand anything. David is about to become someone you should never treat this way." "What do you mean?" John and everyone else listened intently to Mr. Johnson's every word. Even I was anxious to hear what he would say. Mr. Johnson finally spoke. "David, you are just like your father, ambitious and dedicated to this company. I believe you can handle this company when I step down. I want to retire soon." Everyone watched in stunned silence. John was too shocked to speak. "Will you become the president of this company?" Mr. Johnson looked at me with a serious gaze. "Me, the president?" Even though I married Mr. Johnson's daughter, making me president seemed far-fetched. Then, the sales department door opened again, and the vice president, Mr. Anderson, entered. "David will surely lead this company to great heights. He had a stellar reputation during his overseas assignment. He'll do just fine. My father confidently recommended me." I felt a surge of warmth at his unexpected praise. "Thank you, Dad." "Wait, Dad? The vice president is your father?" John stammered, clearly shaken. There was another secret I had kept from everyone. The vice president of this company was indeed my father. He and Mr. Johnson had founded this company from the ground up. Mr. Johnson and my father worked tirelessly to grow this company from nothing. I kept this a secret because I didn't want to be seen as benefiting from nepotism. Having decided to join the company straight out of high school, I wanted to carve out my own future on my own merits. My father shared this sentiment and hadn't even disclosed our relationship to Mr. Johnson. When I found out, I was so shocked I nearly fell over. When I introduced Emily to my parents before our wedding, my father was overjoyed and moved to tears. He believed that I could make Emily happy. Ignoring John, I shook hands firmly with Mr. Johnson. "I will work hard to uplift this company and make Emily happy." As I said this, the sales department erupted in warm applause. "I'm relieved to hear that. Now I can retire peacefully," Mr. Johnson said. On the other hand, John looked pale and stunned. "David as the president of this company? This can't be happening. I must be dreaming." John muttered, collapsing to his knees. Mr. Johnson then dealt John a further blow. "You have been harsh on David and Jim. There are many employees who joined this company straight out of high school. with you as their superior. More employees will suffer. You are demoted as of today." John looked at Mr. Johnson with desperate eyes. "Demoted? But I've worked so hard. Please, give me another chance. I'll try to be a better manager." Jim, who had been quietly listening, raised his voice. "Someone who looked down on us, as incompetent high school graduates, can't suddenly become a good manager. Start over from scratch." Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. "Unfortunately, I agree. People don't change that quickly. Reflect on your past actions." John hung his head and began to cry. None of our colleagues went over to comfort him. As Mr. Johnson decreed, John was demoted and transferred. He kept begging Mr. Johnson to reconsider, but to no avail. Eventually, John was sent to a branch office in a remote location, where he continued to cause problems by looking down on high school graduates. Mr. Johnson then ordered John to be transferred to a subsidiary company. But John's pride was too great, and he chose to resign. Now, no one knows where John is or what he's doing. It's a result of his own actions, for never valuing his subordinates. As for me, I am now happily living in the US with Emily. After being apart for so long, I am determined to make up for lost time and build a happy family. I also aspire to become a respected president that all employees want to follow.